Well, it's the end of October, which means it's time for me to reminisce about the best Halloween costume I ever put together.
I'm on my way to Flavor Town. This is Banner, Dragons, and I.
Anyway, since I know I'll never be able to top my Guy Fieri costume, I have to find some other way to get into the spirit of the season. And what better way than some spooky board games? So if you want to know some of my favorite spooky board games to play during this very spooky season, then might I suggest... Hi, I'm Alex, and welcome to Might I Suggest a Game, a channel devoted to helping you find your perfect board game. Today, because we're so close to Halloween, I'll be taking you through my specially curated board game tasting flight of spooky games that are perfect for this time of year. I'll be going through my selections in order of increasing complexity, so whether you're a seasoned gamer or you're just getting into the hobby, I hope there's at least something in this flight for you. Oh, and I should also mention that each of these games just so happens to be cooperative. I guess the designers have seen enough scary movies to know that splitting up never ends well.
That's a great idea. I'm with that.
Anyways, will one of these spooky games be the perfect game for you? Let's find out, shall we? Scooby-Doo Escape from the Haunted Mansion is a family-weight escape room style game for 1 to 5 players from OP Games. The game takes about an hour per chapter and is split into 2 different chapters with a convenient place to pause in the middle. In the game, you'll play as different Mystery Inc. characters, each of which has a unique player ability that'll let them discover special clues. You'll explore different rooms, solve puzzles, and collect clues on the way to find the true culprit behind the haunting of this mansion. Here's a look inside the box. Because this game is a heavy storytelling game, you're going to want to read the mystery manual first. This should give you all the information you need to get started. Next, you'll have the reference books for all 5 different Mystery Inc. characters. You'll use each of these to look up different character-specific clues throughout the game. Next up are the map tiles, and you'll use these to build up the haunted mansion as you explore it. I'd flip them over, but I don't want to spoil anything. I guess I'll keep these clue cards a secret for now as well. As you get deeper into the investigation, you'll be able to open these secret envelopes, which include different puzzles and relevant information that you can use to solve the mystery. You'll also get these little standees, which will help you keep track of where you are in the mansion. These standees also include the special action that each character is capable of. This will help you remember it when you split up and look for clues. Anyways, that's what's inside Scooby-Doo Escape from the Haunted Mansion. Now let's get back to my thoughts on this game. Here's what I really like about Scooby-Doo Escape from the Haunted Mansion. This game feels like you got dropped right into an episode of Scooby-Doo. I used to love watching the cartoons growing up, so this was a huge hit of nostalgia as soon as we opened the box. I also love the different actions that each character specializes in, especially Shaggy's eat action.
If you don't mind, we'd like to be alone with the pizza.
These actions feel super thematic, and they add another layer to figuring out how to piece each clue together. The mechanics of the game are simple enough, but the puzzles actually get trickier as the investigation goes on, so even though it's a family-weight game that you can definitely play with younger kids, you still feel a sense of accomplishment when you finally solve the mystery. Now, the only bummer with this game is that it's a one-time play. Once you've solved the mystery, then you're finished with the game and you can't play again because you already know all the spoilers. But with that being said, after we completed it, we've enjoyed sharing it with all of our friends to let them have the same fun experience that we had on their own time. So when you're done with this one, maybe you can pack it up and give it to one lucky trick-or-treater this year. Anyways, if you love the classic Scooby-Doo cartoons and you really want a chance to join the Mystery Inc. crew and officially be one of those meddling kids,
and I would have succeeded if it hadn't been for these meddling kids,
then might I suggest Scooby-Doo Escape from the Haunted Mansion. Hey, time out. If you're enjoying this video, why not take a second to subscribe and hit that little bell button so you can get notified when I post new content. I always love hearing from my viewers, so if you have some spooky games to suggest, drop them below in the comments. Since I'm only doing 3 games in this flight, I know there's tons of spooky games that I'll miss, so I'm counting on you guys to fill out the comments with all the best spooky games to play around this time of year. Anyways, I'm looking forward to see what you all come up with. Let's get back to the flight. Horrified is a cooperative monster-slaying game for 1 to 5 players from Ravensburger and Prospero Hall. It's a really simple game to learn and to teach, and it usually takes about an hour to play, depending on the player count. In Horrified, you and your teammates are valiant citizens of a town being assaulted by classic monster tropes like Dracula, the Mummy, and the creature from the Black Lagoon. You'll need to work together to protect helpless villagers and collect the specific item tiles that each monster is vulnerable to. The tricky part is that each monster has a different defeat condition, which is uniquely thematic to that monster. Usually there's a task task that you have to complete in order to weaken the monster, and then a final victory condition that'll get rid of the monster for good. Seems pretty easy, right? Oh, I forgot to mention, you're playing against multiple monsters. You'll start off in the base game playing against 2 monsters, but if you want to scale up the difficulty, you can keep adding monsters to your heart's content. With a bunch of players and a bunch of monsters running around the board wreaking havoc each turn, this game can feel a bit chaotic at times, but if you can stay cool and focus on knocking each monster out one by one, then you'll be well on your way to becoming a hometown hero. Here's a look inside the box. After you're done staring at this awesome box art, the first thing you see in the box is a friendly warning. It reminds me of black and white horror movies, and I think it's a nice touch. The board itself is pretty simple, including all the classic small town locations like the precinct and the inn. The rulebook is pretty slim and pretty easy to understand, but make sure you spend some time in there so your first game goes smoothly. Next up are these item tokens, and you're going to need to collect these from all over the board in order to defeat the monsters that you're facing. At the beginning of the game, you'll be assigned one of these hero badges, which will tell you how many actions you can take, your special action that's unique to you, and your starting location on the board. You'll also get a special standee in your color. The other uncolored standees represent citizens that you'll have to rescue. Now let's get into the monsters. First up is the Wolfman. You'll have to find the cure to this guy before he bites you. Next is the Invisible Man. The hardest part about him is proving that he exists. Next up is the Mummy. You'll have to find a way to break the Pharaoh's curse to get rid of this guy. Then there's the classic Dracula. You'll have to avoid his bite and smash a bunch of his coffins so he can't come back and haunt you later. If you fight the creature from the Black Lagoon, you'll have to find a way to kick him out of his lair in order to win. And lastly is Frankenstein and the Bride of Frankenstein. You'll have to teach these 2 monsters how to be human before they ravage the entire town. The box also includes mats for each monster to remind you of their powers, their special actions that they can take, and the different conditions that you'll have to meet in order to weaken them and then, eventually, defeat them. The game also includes some helpful reference cards which reminds you which actions can be taken when, as well as a perks deck that includes bonuses that'll help you defeat different monsters, and a monster deck which will determine what each creature does during the monster phase. The monster cards have a reference on them to show which monsters will be activated this turn and how. The rest of the box includes some combat dice and some location overlays which you'll put on the different locations if that specific monster is in the game. It also includes some cool custom cardboard markers for each monster and the terror that they might produce. Anyways, that's what's in a box of Horrified. Now let's jump back into my thoughts on this game. Here's what I love about Horrified. First off, I love the thematic elements of this game. The gameplay of each monster feels so in line with what that specific monster would do and the type of terror they would induce if they showed up in your backyard. The game is really easy to pick up and start playing right away, but it actually hides a nice depth of strategy, which makes it a great pick for newbies and veterans alike. Plus, with so many different combinations of monsters available now, especially with the new American Monsters expansion that just came out, the replayability of this one is super high. This is one that always makes it to the table around this time of year because it's the perfect game to get you in the mood to pop some popcorn and watch a campy horror classic right after.
I see you shiver with anticipation.
Now, I will say that this one, because it is so simple, does sometimes suffer from a bit of a quarterbacking problem, something that a lot of co-op games have to deal with. But if you're playing and you feel like one player is trying to make everyone's decision for them, just remind them that you're all on the same team, you're all going towards the same goal, and if the Wolfman was chasing both of you, you'd definitely trip them to get away. So if you're looking for a spooky game with some campy horror vibes that's fun and tense, and it'll help you get into character for when those trick-or-treaters come around, then might I suggest Horrified. The last one in this specially curated board game tasting flight is Mansions of Madness. Mansions of Madness is a complex, app-driven horror and mystery game of eldritch proportions for 1 to 5 players from Fantasy Flight Games. I have the second edition of the game, which includes 4 scenarios on the app that range anywhere from 1 to 6 hours, so make sure you have a solid chunk of time set aside for this one. In Mansions of Madness, you'll be one of 8 brave investigators exploring the haunted streets and corridors of Arkham, trying to solve arcane mysteries and defeat otherworldly monsters before you yourself go insane. There will be secret rooms to discover, unique characters to interact with, complex puzzles to solve, and terrifying creatures to defeat in every scenario, so make sure you dim the lights and put on the spooky soundtrack so you can really get into the spirit. Here's a look inside the box. When you first open up this beast of a game, the first thing you're going to want to do is download the free digital companion app. You're going to need that to play the game, as well as these rule books, but you're not here for rules. You're here for these big old minis. Now, I don't know enough about Eldritch mythology to tell you whether or not this is Cthulhu, but it looks pretty Cthulhu-esque to me. You also have these smaller sculpts like this little wyvern right here that looks pretty cool. You also have this cool swamp creature looking thing. These are just a few of the examples, but you can see the type of detail they have. These minis also come with a cool base that they can slot into and have room for a card that'll give their name and hit points. You'll also be doing ability checks throughout the game that'll require you to roll several 8-sided die, like this one. There are also various tokens you can encounter, like person tokens, or search and interact tokens, or even explore and sight tokens. There's also some really cool minis for each playable character. This one's Agatha Crane. She's a parapsychologist. And this one's Rita Young. She's an athlete, hence the pose. This game also includes a bunch of cards like these condition cards, item cards, and spell cards, as well as these damage cards and horror cards, which you want to try to avoid. And these are some of the examples of some of the enemies you might face. The second edition also includes a conversion kit if you want to integrate it into the first edition. Last but not least are these really awesome corridor and room tiles that have some spectacular detail and really add to the immersive experience of the whole thing. Anyways, that's what's inside the box of Mansions of Madness. Now let's get into some of my thoughts on the actual game.
Here's what I love about Mansions of Madness. In my opinion, the best part of this game is how immersive it is. It feels less like a game to be played and more like an experience to be had, with each scenario getting more intense and more challenging than the last. Even though each game can run several hours, you're so invested in the gameplay that there's very little clock watching because there's always something going on. Not to mention the amazing production quality. There are so many awesome minis and sculpts to play with that it's almost not so bad when you summon a giant eldritch beast onto the board. Now, the one thing I'll say about Mansions of Madness is that it is a lot. There's a lot of pieces, a lot of rules, and a lot of stuff that you need to learn in order to get started. Plus, it ain't cheap either, unless you're like me and got it as a gift. Shout out to Millie, one of the best gift givers I know. But if you can make it past the high barrier to entry, this is one of the most thematic and immersive games that I've ever played. It really pushes the genre to the limits and challenges what it means to be a board game. That fact alone is why, even though it doesn't get to the table that often, it still holds a very special place in my collection. So, if you're looking for the ultimate immersive haunted adventure this Halloween and you aren't afraid to mess around and actually summon Cthulhu or something, then might I suggest Mansions of Madness. Thanks so much for sticking around for my specially curated board game tasting flight of spooky games to play this Halloween. I hope you get a chance to try out at least one of these games before the spooky season is over. There's really no other time of the year quite like this, so grab some candy corn and one of these games and let me know how it goes. Anyways, thanks so much to everyone who's supported me so far. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe so I can keep growing this channel and keep helping you find your perfect board game. Once again, this has been a Might I Suggest a Game production, and I'm Alex, your board game sommelier, signing off.